Going.
Excellent.
And a
All right.
reminder to everyone to mute themselves, please.
Yes, so if everyone could mute yourself and maybe turn off your video during the presentation just to save bandwidth, we'll hand it over to Vince. Vince, welcome to FMDiSC.
Thank you for having me. And again, sorry to disappoint you, Jeff, that I was not in Germany. Maybe 2 weeks later, you would have caught me in Germany. But anyway, here in the US at this time. So cool. I hope I'm not going to disappoint you either with my topic today. So let's see here. And welcome, Ben from Munich. Yes. International presentations these days. We just had a presentation last night with DIGFM with people from all over the place. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, this is part two. I'm gonna just close this window here. This is part two of my transactions discussion. I've been really digging transactions lately. It kind of, was something that Todd talked about many years ago, and it's been around for years and years, but there's one small thing that shifted my perspective on this. And maybe it'll shift your perspective on it as well too. And we'll take a look at it when we look at the simple example I put together. So I'm just going to go through some introductory slides for people who don't know me. Let's see here. So I'm Vincenzo Menanno, Director of FileMaker Development, and I work at Beezwax. And we have a blog that there's a lot of great content on the blog from a lot of really talented people that you can meet the bees, so to speak, on our page. We've been involved with the 42U program for a number of years, and I don't know what the numbers are, that they're quite big. Like 20% of our staff or more is all from 42U, and now with the Quasar program kind of getting underway with Kwame, who used to lead the program for 42U. We're now working with him there to get more talent. So it's really incredible to see. I hate to say young, but again, to say new people in the community and super talented, super bright, and super jazzed to work with them. I'll post these links again later at the end of the slide if anybody wants to contact me. Hold on 1 second. Okay, these are my kids. I have 2 kids, Fiorella and Luciano. They're growing up very quickly, and that's Fiorella right here. So she likes to jump in on some of my meetings sometimes. Okay, so let's see. Things I like to do. I like to go hiking, biking. I like traveling. Hoping to do more of that now. I love architecture. I love precision engineering, sharp knives, and parking backwards. Parking backwards is an interesting thing that I've found in Germany in particular. People like to park backwards. And it kind of makes me think a little bit about what I'm talking about today in terms of transactions, because it's a little bit like being ready. And being ready in terms of your data is ready to deliver. There's no extra work to do to calculate unstored calculations and deliver the data. So it's a little bit kind of related to that. Anyway, just to recap some of my part 1 talk, which there was a link for it that I gave about 4 months ago at DIGFM. We talked about native FileMaker development. We talked about some transactional considerations. We talked about what's an important aspect is, which we lack of, which we have a very big lack of in the community, is real built-in tools to measure things. So there was, for a long time, one of my favorite tools was the network monitor tool that was available in the community. Now recently, there's also a blog on Soliant about this new feature that's available. It's kind of hidden, but basically you can put in a text file in your applications directory with some release debug flags, And when you put that in there, you get some features. One of them, and primarily, is you get the release debug log, and you can analyze that log for not only network traffic to and from the server, but also for the amount of time it takes for the that call to get processed. And so you can use that data to see how performance was before and after your changes. So I really highly encourage or strongly suggest that anything that you build that you want to try and see improve performance, always have a way to measure it, obviously. We talked about delivering data and transaction refresher, basically talking about the mechanics of transactions, transactional delete, entering data, and that was part one. So today, part two, we're going to go through a definition of transactions versus native. We're going to talk about some free stuff that we get just by the fact that like you're upgrading to the latest version of stuff, and level of difficulty with regards to transactions, and the benefits of the release debug log, and what I like to call what are transactional opportunities. So we'll go into that in a little bit. And then stored values, auditing, and locking, which are probably the three hardest things to do about transactions. Again, I break out transactions in two levels. From my point of view, is like actually executing or doing a transaction is very easy. There's not much work to it, but the benefits that you want to get from using transactions, those things can be quite hard and ordered in this order of difficulty. Getting away from unstored calcs to stored calcs is a rather complex thing to get right, and then you want to piggyback on the fact that like you're doing the transaction, you want to also audit the changes that you do while that transaction happens, and then locking of records. So some people say there's a lot of beauty in the fact that I've locked a record, no one else can change it, and I can talk about some ways to get around that and things. So, and we'll have some demos along the way. So, okay, definitions. So transaction, if you look this up in the dictionary, an input message to a computer system that must be dealt with as a singular unit of work. So in FileMaker terms, the ability to create, update, and delete data or records all at one atomic transaction, as one atomic transaction. So FileMaker inherently is transactional when it comes to editing related records in a portal. So if you have a record and you modify a field on that record, and you modify fields like in a portal of a related record, you've locked the related record and the parent record at the same time implicitly. And then when you hit enter or you click outside the field, the fact that you've actually committed both of those records at the same time. So you're already doing transactions, whether you know it or not. The other, native way of just doing data entry is, you just go to a layout, you find a record, you create, you update, delete the record, and yeah. So that's definition of FileMaker's basics of what you're doing automatically behind the scenes. Some of the free stuff I like to talk about is stuff that we get by the fact that FileMaker or Claris has been engineering the platform and building improvements to the platform, and we get those benefits just for free by the fact that we're staying current, let's say, or like getting the latest version, etc. Apart from machines getting better, which is a different topic. So I'm speaking, you have to wait. So apart from machines getting better, there's stuff that has been improving over the years. And there's a favorite quote of mine: there are only two hard things in computer science: cache invalidation and naming things. And this is a quote from Phil Carlton from Martin Fowler. But it's a quote that is often passed around, and that cache invalidation is a fascinating topic, and having to deal with the way we're actually doing some work now with local editing, local file. We get a local copy of the data to edit it, and I'll talk about that later. We've been learning a lot about this topic. It's a fascinating area to learn more about. The other thing about stuff that we getting for free, and this is a file I built to parse out the release debug log that is kind of flattening the data, so we see both the bytes sent and the bytes received and the duration of the call. And what I was saying, that we get stuff for free, we getting stuff for free over the years, like for example, just opening a file has gotten so much better in the last 3 or 4 versions, because they have this caching mechanism that they're doing that caches not only schema but data. So like if you open up a system every day, if you open it up for the first time, you'll get a hit in terms of bringing down the structure of the system, the layouts, the styles, the scripts, the schema, and the data. And then if you open it up again, you'll see that performance is to get in there is super snappy. So like an example of this is that you're getting so much faster performance getting in, and this has been an improvement that they've built in the product that you don't have to kind of worry about. So just staying current gets you these free benefits. So if you're let's see here. Yeah, so opening the file is faster. Oh, sorry, this slide is more in related to caching of some data that's also, let's see, is this the one? Oh, sorry, I have another one. There's another slide that's very similar to this one. I'm getting confused. Anyway, just to end on the topic of the free stuff that we get, just staying current, you'll get better improvements. There's more free stuff, and it's not beer. So if any of you guys have started to get your hands on one of these things, they're absolutely astounding. I have one of the latest MacBook Pro Intel machines, and I got an M1 just at the end of last year, and have been using it and testing things on it, and it has blown me away. I read all the reviews, and people were talking about it, and it's like, oh my God. Once you get your, to play around with it, and there's more coming. This is M1, so M2, M3, whatever. But Apple has done an amazing, incredible job, and FileMaker on this machine is just going to blow you away. It's unbelievable. Battery life and performance. The typical thing that people say, you can't have, really strong performance without sacrificing battery life. Like I stress tested the machine, I could never get the fans to run, no matter what I did. I don't think fans are in that machine. It's a MacBook Pro. Anyway, I'm like super excited what's happening in the Mac community with regards to Apple Silicon. So, okay, getting back to transactions. So again, the level of difficulty, I really see it as two sides. There's an easy aspect to it, and there's the difficult aspect to it. So easy, basically you can create, edit, delete, and build a transaction. It's very simple to do. There's not a lot of work. The difficult side is, figuring out that if you want to group together a bunch of records that you want to control under one atomic transaction, the timing of it and also the way we do it in terms of editing locally, people question it because, well, what happens if someone else has edited the record? So I can talk a little bit about how we can approach that, and there's two things basically. One is for the clients that we do work for, they're not so concerned that someone else is editing the record. What they're more concerned about is the audit history. So who changed it and what did they change it to? I'm not so concerned that you were in there and you were starting to edit it and someone else got in there and made some changes while you were editing it and got their changes in before yours. What most of our clients are interested in is the fact that there's a way to see who changed it and when. But if you do need the control that you need to see, like that you lock the record, and if you made changes and before you submit it, someone else made changes, there's ways to build that, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. The fact that you have this one point of transaction, you can also add the aspect of auditing all the changes that you made as part of the transaction, and we'll talk about that as well. And then the obvious and most important aspect, and probably the most difficult to achieve, is moving away from unstored calcs to stored calcs. And we did this kind of like in a semi-transactional way when we first started down this journey, and which was basically we tied some of our calculations to refresh based on a trigger. So we would put in some data, we would commit it, then we would run to the parent record and find it, and then kind of tickle it or refresh it to update a timestamp. And some calculations were all like hooked into that timestamp. And if they would see the timestamp change, then they would recalculate. The problem with that is that it's very heavy-handed. And if you have a lot of related data, or you have a lot of unstored calcs that point to different tables, etc., that can take quite a while for that record to actually refresh and commit. It's very nice because all you have to do is you have one place to touch, and then everything just falls in sync. However, because you committed the other data, and then you try and run over here and update this parent record to try and get it updated. Let's say in the process of running over there and doing that, and by the way, this is all running PSOS, so everything runs pretty fast. You're running there, someone else has locked that record. Now you've got this state of like, oh, that data is stale, but I've got it updated here, but now that record doesn't show accurate information for the user who's looking at it. So you've got this conundrum because it's not fully transactional. So we really want it to be all or nothing. So that's a really important point, and it's fairly difficult to get right. Again, it's all based on as we as developers who live and breathe this stuff, we know the rules, we know how to break them. I wouldn't kind of encourage people who are new to this to try and endeavor to do things at this level unless they know what they're doing, really. This is kind of lead into some demo that I'm going to talk about, but in one of my presentations, Matt stopped me and said, "Hey, what's that?" Basically, I've been using emojis everywhere, and I found that you can stick emojis on the graph, and you can, up here, there's 3 elements. There's an emoji for that text object. There's a text object, and there's another text object that provides a line. So, it's a nice way to kind of bring some visual aspects to your graph that are kind of cool. And when I presented this and Matt Petrosky was looking at it, it was like, hey, that's really cool. So I thought I'd just toss it in here and point it out. So the easy side of transactions. So let's take a look at transactions here. So where's my movies? Okay, so yeah, so this is, I have a few movies to show. So, and this is what I've been doing lately. I've been doing these time-lapse movies. Okay, so we know just in general, FileMaker's natural behavior. You know, user A modifies a record, it's locked. User B can't change it, right? And but then user A commits the record, and then the server will update the records for anybody that's looking at them, right? So when we embarked down this road, what we started doing is we started using globals. So we would present like a popover and or a card window, and we take the data from the record, we put it in the global, and we give the user a button, save or cancel, and then the save would basically package up the data points for what needed to be changed and send that to the server to transact it on the server. And the good thing with that is it's okay if the user has like a single window environment, because those globals are there. Where it gets weird is like if you have two records and in two windows, and you start editing it, the values of this record in this global, and then you go to another record in another window and you click on that, and you're basically loading the globals from the second record into the same globals that were used for the first record. And now you've got cross proliferation between those two globals, and that was a problem. And then like if you ever send it, it sends updates to the users, and now you've updated maybe data from the wrong record, and so it's a big mess. Fast forward to what we're doing now is that when we open a file, what we do is we deploy what is called like a local file. So inside the hosted file, we wanted to call this the Trojan approach, but that wasn't a good idea. But anyway, so inside the hosted file, there's a container that holds another FileMaker file, and it's got like a minimal amount of schema that allows us to deploy this file. And when on deploying of the file, like in deployed in the temp directory, we establish a variable file reference to this file. And then once that file reference is established, basically tables in the local file are available on the graph of the hosted file. And you can build interfaces, right, in card windows. So you can build a card window that that is based on a table occurrence that comes from the local file. And by doing so, what you're able to do is you say, hey, create a new record in this layout, which is basically the underpinning of the table that comes from the local file. Basically, you're creating a record locally. It's a local cache, basically. And so you can either create a new record to enter data, or you can edit an existing record by pulling the data from the existing record, creating the local version of that record, and filling out all the data for it, right? So fill out all the data. And then when you're done, you basically the same approach. You package up the JSON, you send it to the server, and you transact on that record that was on there, right? So, and then the beauty of this is that you could have multiple windows, and every window can have its own card window, and that card window can be a different record in the local file, right? So now I have two windows that I'm editing. I have two local copies of records that I'm editing locally. And the beauty of it is you can commit at your heart's content, because there's no network traffic. There's no network traffic. You haven't locked any records. And so you can do these local editing things, and there's no crosstalk, especially between those two records, because they're not globals. They're actual records locally. So again, you save the data, you package up the data as JSON, you send it to the server, and there you have it, right? So to deal with the locks, one approach, if you want to do this, is you can build hashes, and you can build a hash of the data that is of the current state. You can build a hash of the future state and a hash of the past state. And the hash could be like, so the past state is the record that it was, what the record data was at the time that you started the edit. The future state is what you want the record to be, and it's based on the hash of what's in your local file, let's say. And then the current state is what the hash is at the time that you commit the record on the server. And the reason for doing it on the server for the hash of the current state is because if you've got a very busy environment, the server could be very, very busy and not send updates to the client. So you might, a big import might be happening. You might have updated your record that you had, and it might have changed. And so if you were to try and get the current state of the record that you have now, because the server was so busy, not able to send you the current state, the current state of it, you would get an old state of it anyway. So there's ways to do this such that you can compare if the future state is not equal to the past, then you would send it to the server. If the future state and the past state are the same, you basically made no changes and you just close the window. And then when you run on a server again, you would compare the let's see, the future, sorry, that's wrong there. It should say future state to current. So, or you could compare actually past state to current, which means that someone else changed the record before you submitted your changes. And you could then decide whether or not you would want your transaction to be entered, or whether you would send back to the user, hey, someone else made some changes, you know, while you were editing, and do you want to review those changes, or do you want to submit your changes? So there's all kinds of ways you can go, and there's ways to deal with this. And another thing that's interesting to note is that, I mean, many of us are familiar with get record modification count, and we don't use that just because, I mean, we use it in some ways just to see certain things about the record itself. But if you had, let's say, you know, a system where some fields of a record are really areas of that record that are modified by someone else, and some other fields are fields that relate to, let's say, I don't know, personal info or you know, contract details or something like that. There's two areas that are different. What you could do is you could build hashes based on those areas, and then those could be compared independently. And so there's a lot of flexibility that you can do with this. And so better than record modification count. And it's basically using, I think it's called get container attributes, and you build it using the MD5 hash of, and you don't have to use a container. It could be a text field, by the way. Okay, so this is the end of this movie. We can move on to the next one. So transactions, kind of transactions in a nutshell. So to build a transaction, basically the way we're doing it right now, we just have a transaction table, and we, without going into too much complexity, there's an auditing aspect related to it. And then if you look at the two tables in the example I'm presenting here, basically you have tables connected to the transaction table, and then you have the ability to create records via the relationship to any of these tables that are connected off of the transaction table. And the transaction table we discovered we can actually reduce the number of fields. We don't have to have all the fields in the table for every single relationship. What we discovered is because we're using UUIDs, everything is unique kind of universally. We just have one field called ID internal. And ID internal is kind of like the key that matches by primary key to any of the tables we're targeting. So, and the cool thing, the really cool thing for me was the recycling of the fact that when you create a transaction record and it's not committed, that you can just keep popping in a different key, point to a different record in the relationship graph, and you can create or update any record or delete any record that's related through that relationship. So there's a little bit of overhead in the fact that you have to create these table occurrences, etc. So, you know, you create the transaction record, you would get the JSON from your transaction, you would unpack it, you would do whatever you need to do with every one of those keys, and then you create an update or delete again through that relationship. And if any errors along the way, you would just revert that record, because that record, that transaction record is the whole glue or the key. It keeps growing.
So what you do is,
sorry, is there someone asking a question? No. So if there is a question, I can pause here. I'm happy to pause here if there's questions. Okay, I'll keep going. If there's any errors, you revert. Otherwise, just committing, you basically committed everything at once. Okay, so that's that. So that's giving you kind of a highlight of that. And so this is kind of going to show you the mechanism by which this works. So in this video here, we have a parent and a child table, and we have the record in the middle, which I apologize, there's a problem with the portal not showing the colors for each person, but it's because I changed something at the last minute. But anyway, those are related records. So you have a parent and a child, and they're connected to the transaction table occurrence. Again, there's the also, let's see, just fast forward here a little bit. So we have the so the transaction table has just a key. That's all it has, and it could be most of the time in our systems it's just a text key. So it's you know, and it's got those other fields too, like created, modified, created by, duration, the JSON payload, and the result, if it was successful or not. And then the JSON payload could be pretty big. Could be a sizable blob of JSON that represents what we wanted to do. And we don't keep the JSON around if the transaction was successful. If the transaction failed, we keep it so we can investigate what happened. Again, the relationships for this are very simple. It's basically that one key related to the primary key of each table. So we can just fast forward here a little bit. Okay, so let's look at it in action here. So we got the debugger on. So we're just making sure, the first step is just make sure that you're on the transaction window, just for this example. Then the first thing we do is we step into it, and we'll go and we'll create a new record. So once we have the new record created, right, as long as you don't commit that record, everything about your transaction is going to be like in memory. And so this example kind of illustrates the beauty of you know, just setting that that field, the transaction ID field, right, to the first ID, and then you'll have a relationship to anything that matches. In this case, because it's numeric IDs, it'll match a bunch of things. But again, I use this for simplicity, but normally we have UUIDs. So we're going to go to the first portal for the color. So we're going to go to the object portal here, and then we're going to delete that portal row. So here, we're going to just fast forward this a little bit. Okay, so quiet. And so if we delete that portal row, the record is going to be gone. Okay. And so we'll see that record gone. And if we go step through the script here, we'll see that we'll just kind of emptying out the color records for each for the first user, and then we'll end up on the user record, and then we'll get rid of that as well. So so there's the parent record going to get deleted here. Okay. And so now we have one less person record coming up. Okay, so now we have, yeah, there's two records. Okay, so person record is gone. So we got rid of all the colors for the first person. Now we're going to get rid of all the colors for the second person. So we go through that. And again, we're just recycling the keys and the ID. And so that gives us a pointer to the other records. And then when we're done, we would, you know, get rid of the last person as well. Okay, so now all the color records are gone, and then all the person records are gone. And then if we do the last step here, so let's see, this is delete the portal row, that's gone, and now everything is gone. Everything is gone. Okay, and if I revert the record, the transaction record, again, the key is not to commit the transaction record. If I do that.
Is the brown a comment that you put in the script?
The brown here? Yeah, that's a comment with emojis again.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, yeah, you can spice up your solution. You can put emojis anywhere. So, okay. So now if I revert the record, we'll see all the data magically come back. So revert, and let's see here. So there we go. Fast forward this a little bit. There we go. So reverted the last step, all the data came back. We lost the transaction record. If you want to keep the transaction record, you could do something where you create it, you have the JSON payload, you commit it, and then you open it again. So that way, if you revert it, you still have the payload, you could look at what happened, etc. So, but this is a great illustration of the mechanics of it. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. Okay. Any questions about this?
Vince, have you done any sort of collision testing on something like this? Because you're sort of casting a net over a large number of records. And if somebody else in a shared solution is deleting or modifying one of those, say, child records, you know, if they were to delete one and then you were to revert a delete on your side, would that throw an error because it was trying to undelete a record that was deleted elsewhere? Or what are sort of the interactions over the network of this kind of technique?
Yeah, again, that's a great question, Chris. If you run it, like the beauty of this is obviously packaging it up, using the local file, packaging up the data, sending it to the server. Don't do this locally because you're not gonna, you know, the benefit is the speed at which it's transacted. This is also another benefit to highlight in that, you know, this happens in like, you know, a quarter of a second, very, very fast to remove all this data. But like what you're saying is the collision of the possibility that someone else deleted a record and I try and delete it. So I didn't show the error trapping, but like if you put error trapping on after each one of those requests, if the record is not there, you don't have access to it, you would capture that and you would abort the transaction. So something went wrong. Someone else deleted one of your records that you were thinking was there and it's not there. And then you could, you know, abort that and report that back. And if the user then tried again, they would only have a subset of records to delete. But yeah, we did a lot of collision tests in different ways. And one of the main things to note is that if you want to kind of make sure that you're working with what you have, that you need to be able to group together as part of your transaction. One of the techniques that we do is we lock everything we know we're going to use. So if we know we can't get a lock on it, then we know going into the transaction, even before modifying any data, we know like, oh, okay, there's something is busy, we can't change it, so we're not even going to bother with the transaction. Chris, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's sort of where I was heading is, does this technique supply a lock to, say, the child record? If I delete it, have I essentially opened it for editing, and do I have dibs on it, or can somebody else change it underneath me, even though I have a pending commit that would have deleted it? Can someone else still manipulate the record?
Yeah. No, so good point. The second point is what I'm saying is kind of addresses that issue, which is we lock everything we know we need beforehand. So that way, if we can't get a lock on it, then we don't go into the transaction.
So the process you went through, you would actually sprinkle in open record steps in there to lock it all down.
Yeah, this video was just prepared to demonstrate the mechanics of how to kind of wire it up to a single transaction event, right? So the transaction record itself can be the thing that you're controlling. But there's, like I said, there's a lot more to it than that. But yeah. Okay.
Vince?
Yes.
Quick, just a follow-up question to that. Could you just say a little bit more about that? How you do the record locking? Is there an easy way to?
I probably will not be able to get to that right now. The record locking is quite. It's basically some very customized JSON that we write in the framework that we have, in the ability to know, like, okay, I have this UUID, what does it belong to? I know what I need to lock, and basically we loop over that part and we get a lock on everything. If we can't get a lock on everything, then we don't proceed. Okay. So yeah.
Is it like just set field or
open record?
Open record. Yeah,
okay.
open.
That's the idea. Yeah.
Either open record or setting a field in the other.
I've ever used open record. Yeah.
These other two videos, I'll run through them really quick. And these videos here just show this tool I built, which I haven't finished or polished off yet. So it's a tool that that works with the release debug flags. And I'll fast forward through this because this is just kind of waiting. Okay. So basically what I just did is I opened up this file that we wrote. And what this file does is use FileMaker read write steps. And it basically sets a marker as to where in the release debug flag am I starting from. Then, so I said start, sorry, apologize here. So I said start, and then when I said stop, basically when I stop, it's reading from that starting point to the ending point and creating records and flattening them. And when I do that, what I end up getting is a result that I'll show you in the next screen. But wait, what I just did is I did a test for the file in the screen behind there for 1,056 records that have related records, and I have a summary field at the top. And because I have a summary field at the top, when I'm loading this from the server, it's pulling down all the records. And if those records, and on top of it all, it's got to pull down all the related records as well to deliver the result. And so the point I'm trying to make with this video is that use the release debug flag to read the data that's happening, so that you can test your changes that you make to see the impact of the changes that you're making. So we need tools as a community to be able to understand what's going on in our solutions. This one here, Again, I just said start, I give it a name, I run the test, I say stop. And then the beauty of it is when you compare it. And so this is the comparing of, what the transactions can deliver. So like if you look at these numbers, they're astounding. So like in the first example, I had a file that had all unstored calcs, and basically, so that this is the first example down here. Because it had unstored calcs, when I looked at that list view and I had summary fields at the top, and the summary fields were pointing to unstored calculations for related data. Basically, the thing is there was a lot of back and forth. So you see, like, instead of 17 calls, we have 4,030 calls back and forth to the server to get the data. And then the amount of traffic to get all the data, and the duration is astounding. Like 663 seconds versus 4 seconds for the same data to represent the same information. So definitely this is a kind of like a, definitely use release debug to kind of dig into this. And I want to put a little bit of an interface in front of this file because it's really easy to use, and I would like to get it out there. I just haven't had the time, and I need to also test it on Windows as well. But anyway, I'd like to put this file out there, and it gives you kind of a summarized view of the information. Let me see if I show a detailed view of it. I don't. Okay. All right. So that's that. Yeah. And then, as I was pointing out before, kind of like the three main things that are the hardest to do with transactions, or getting the stored values. And so three things to consider here with stored values that I'll just pause here. Okay, so with stored values, if you're going to use FileMaker aggregate functions, they don't work on uncommitted records. So, like if you add records and you have a parent record where you want to have the count of project tasks. Let's say one project already has 5 tasks. You add another one, you want to update that record to say it's got 6 tasks. Just be aware that FileMaker aggregate functions will not see that newly uncommitted record. Okay. The second, execute SQL function will return results from uncommitted records, but I strongly think that using execute SQL aggregate functions is kind of a bad thing for performance, and especially if you have a lot of data. So the other way to do this is just calculate the changes and just do a delta update on the record. If you know your calculations are accurate and correct, and you were able to lock everything and all that, then updating the record with just the incremental change is the way to go, and it's the fastest way to go. The fact that you're doing the transaction, take advantage of the transaction moment to also build in auditing. So like, what did you change? How did you change it? From what to what, etc. And then locks. So these are the 3 areas that you should maybe consider what you want to do in each of these areas and how you're going to tackle it. But locks is as I described before, you can use the technique of using past, present, and future hashes and build hashes basically just on the things that you allow the user to change. So you're not doing get record modification count, which may be misleading. Okay, almost wrapped up here. Any questions about this?
Vince, just
Yeah.
quick, maybe just briefly, the hashes, they get that. Can you just use FileMaker built-in tools to get your hashes?
Oh yeah, you can use. I think it's called get container attribute.
Yeah.
You give it a field.
Great.
Yeah. You just have to be careful because I think you don't use the list function inside there, because if you say I want to give it a list of fields, you basically want to hard code carriage returns instead of using the list function, because things can kind of collapse if you don't have a value, and then you'll get misleading hashes. So yeah, just a native FileMaker function for that.
Cool.
Okay, and then this is an example of kind of like this is our prototype that we built to kind of demonstrate everything I've just talked about. And so we'll go through here. It's about 1:47, and we'll kind of cover this. So let's see here. Again, actually, this is a demonstration of the local file in action. So again, here's the external data source for the local file. It's got a global variable, and that global variable basically is defined at the opening start of the file. And basically we say, hey, we're gonna put this file in this temp directory, and here's the path to the temp directory, right? So we're gonna get the path to it. We're gonna write out that file, and then once we've wrote out that file, it becomes immediately available in the system for use. And so now there are tables inside that file that are instanced on the graph of the hosted file. Okay, and I find that really cool. So that's a local copy. And so now just fast forward here. So now if I go and I say I want to create a project and a bunch of tasks, so what I'm going to do is I have a card window. This card window is based on a layout that comes from the local file. So here's the local file. And if you see over here, there's one record. That's this record right here. Okay, if I fill it out, all right, I'll put in some data. Hold on. You'll see that the data right here is going to show up on that record over there. So that's 6/12/21. So there's the data, right? The beauty of this is that the user can click anywhere they want. They never commit a record. That never sends any network traffic to the server, right? It's all committed locally, and it's super fast, super fast. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and create some related records. And again, the local records table is on the bottom right. I'm going to create 3 local records. Again, super fast because it's all local. And I'm going to fill those out. So I'm going to fast forward through here. I'm going to fill those out. Okay, so I filled them out. And then basically at this point, this create button here does the stuff I talked about, which is packaging up the JSON and sending it to the server. Okay, and then when we do that, we create our transaction record, we transact the data, we create all the data, and now there's the record down at the bottom down here. Okay, and so there's that. Okay, so the last example I'm going to show you here is the complete kind of solution of all this. So so in this example, let's see, what do we do? So this one creates this one also creates a project and task record. So I'm going to go fast forward a little bit. So create a bunch of tasks, fill in the data, and then submit it. Okay. So so there's the record, that bottom record. So behind the scenes, let's take a look at the. We have a view to the transaction tables. So so here we're seeing the view for us to see the transactions that have occurred. So so the transactions and the auditing are all part of this. So we have the transaction record, we have the table audits, and we have the field audits. And we see at the transaction level who changed it, who created the transaction, when it was created, what type of transaction was it, and the duration of the transaction. We also have the payload only if in case there was an error in the transaction. So let's fast forward through here. Let me make a change. Okay, and I send it. You can see here I made a change. This was an edit to this record, and we have an ID for the record. So if we wanted to go at this, it just tells us what table, what kind of action was taken on that table. It's an edit. We have a create, edit, view, delete audit of the table, and then we have the fields that got affected. Some fields come from the task, some fields come from the project. I apologize if I'm going quickly on this here. Okay, so now let's take a look at the auditing aspect of this. This is my favorite. So this is the auditing view, and basically this is no code. This is like FileMaker professes to like low code, but this is a no code aspect, which is we even contemplated enabling this for the users to go in and toggle their own fields that they want to audit. And so basically that flag that says audit, I can turn that on. So I can turn it on for average task cost and budget. So I'll turn that on. And those, in fact, are also fields that get transacted, and there's a log of the changes to them before and after. Okay, so let's, so if we go look and edit the project record again, we'll see, so in this case, we'll make some changes to the budget. We'll make some changes and we'll submit that. If we look at that, we have changes to the project fields that we entered, but we didn't change any tasks. So the average task cost didn't get logged. So let's make some changes really quickly to the cost of the different tasks. And what we'll end up seeing in the transaction is, and the reason I want to highlight this is because these fields are would normally be calculated fields, and being able to log or audit not just regular text field but calculation fields is a huge thing as well, especially for some of the projects we work on. Anyway, so let's see, that's in this table. This is a project table. You'll see there's no unstored calcs except for this one down here that was used to check something, but otherwise these are all stored values or calculated values. And the other thing here is just showing that you can also audit views of a record. So if you pulled up details on a record, you could show the fact that it was viewed. And then you have some, so one of my pet peeves is that every table always has this created on, created by, modified on, modified by. If you use this approach, all those 4 fields are derived from the transactions and the audits. You don't need all those 4 fields in every single table. If you're very strict about this, you can get rid of those 4 fields. It's just, narrower the table, the better. And then rely on pulling this data through the relationships to the data that you have in the history of the changes. And the other beauty of this whole thing is the mastered, the work that Brendan has and I and Alec and our team have done to deliver this kind of level of simplicity to just go in and turn on or off. I mean, there's no coding whatsoever to get this enabled. So I think that's kind of it. There was one other thing I need to cover. I know I'm going over time. Let's see.
It's okay, Vince. You can take a couple minutes.
Okay. All right. Again, stored versus unstored. This is where I have an example that we use, and again, using the data release debug file to get these numbers and to measure. The numbers are astounding. Like if you're using, and everybody since the last year has had to work from home and all this work like remotely. has just dramatically impacted the fact that we need to up our game. When we have solutions that we support worldwide. So at one point we were, there was teams that were saying, if you can't solve the performance problem, we're off the platform. We got to find something else. And so we've evolved this, and we continue to tweak it and refine it. But I would say, just like a typical Steve Jobs thing that he would say in the past, this is the best that we've ever done. It's like absolutely really fantastic. And this is the example I was showing before. The release debug is really easy to use. It's basically just a text file you put in at the root level of your applications directory. And to get the logging of the traffic on port 5003, all you need to do is add these two flags: force output, remote calls. And if you also want to log and see what the performance is not using the cache, you can also add this other flag called normal temp file. And that's it. And again, this is that example I showed. This is kind of like I don't know, it's kind of like the typical thing that where a new person would build something in FileMaker, and if they're not aware of these subtle things, they'll host it and they'll be in a company, and people start to use it in a LAN, it's fine, but on a WAN, it just falls apart very quickly. So again, transactional opportunities, I mentioned those 3 areas. And yeah, if you look at project creation, and if you take out the WAN aspect, native versus transactional, there's a lot of benefit to doing things transactionally. You don't, sorry, if I go back to the other slide, maybe here, I went too quickly. This one here, right? So you see we're at 22 seconds, but this is doing it over not PSOS. So you still gain benefits, but again, the real benefits are if you're going to use PSOS for all this architecture stuff that you're doing. Anyway, just to recap real quick, we looked at the definition of transactions. We looked at free stuff that we're getting just by staying current, and I can't wait for more M1 machines to come along. The level of difficulty, easy to difficult, the benefits of using release debug, transactional opportunities like stored values, auditing, and locking, and that's it. That's it. So that's my presentation. There's ways that you can reach me, and yeah, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
I have a couple of quick questions I want to just clarify with you, Vince. Nice work, by the way. Very well thought out and very well executed. One question, we're relying on a local file, which obviously we have to control versioning of that. If you've got 160 users that are scattered all over, I don't know if you pack that into a container field, download it every time, or whether there's some sort of control mechanism for that. So that's question 1. Question 2, in a super busy FileMaker environment, if a lot of people are hitting one table, regardless of how wide or how deep that table is, if it's getting, there are times when you can actually lock up a file or lock up a table just because you have so much transaction going against that. Does your transaction table, have you ever seen any of those signs of fragility at all with large loads, or have you had a chance to run this on large loads?
We have a couple of systems that are in production and got a lot of users and using this this framework. We haven't seen any issues, but one of the things that we monitor very closely is the amount of, there's different ways to do PSOS, but we monitor very closely the duration of the transaction time, and we monitor very closely how many PSOS sessions are concurrently running. And so like we're concerned where if we push everything via PSOS and then the transactions themselves are taking like 3 or 4 seconds to complete, and there's a lot of people doing them all at once, that's the one big concern we have. But the volume, I mean, again, it might not be for every situation, and you'd have to probably see about really, really busy loads, how this would pan out. But so far in production systems with hundreds of users, we have not had any problems. To your point about the local file, here's what we do to manage the local file. So we have a checking out mechanism. We can save it as a clone. We have a number of things that we can do. We also write a logging of the changes to it. But basically, you check it out, you make some changes to it, you re-embed it, and then what happens is on every opening of the solution, the user will get a fresh copy. And every time they open the solution, a local copy is deployed. There's no data in the local copy at all. So we always kind of redeploy a new copy. And so they're always getting the latest and greatest, whether they know it or not. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, those were good. Just one last little follow-up. Any security concerns?
No, because you can lock the local file. You can lock it down totally so that when it's deployed, it's like on server, you can say open with these credentials. Because it's not hosted, you can open it with certain credentials that are locked down, and the user doesn't have access to any of the tables or fields or layouts. And as a matter of fact, because all the tables are really displayed in the hosted file, you can take out all the layouts. So even if they got into the local file, they wouldn't see any layouts with any tables. They have nothing they could go and do. And so it can be really locked down if you choose to do so. So yeah.
All right, any other questions? If not, then we're going to, oh, I see Egbert, you got your hand up?
Yeah, maybe I'm not quite sure if I completely understood you, but you showed some examples where you create the records or delete records. But what if you, for instance, join different records into one?
Merge a record into one? What do you?
Well, sorry, merge, join, where you have 2 records or 3 records, and you create a join record with some data from different records.
I mean, that record will also have a primary key and a way to access it. And so it's all dependent on how you build the JSON to represent or touch what you need to touch in that data. So let's say you have 2 tasks, and now those 2 tasks are going to get folded into one task. So basically, you're basically deleting those 2 tasks and creating a new one. So that's the transaction. You're going to be getting rid of those 2 tasks, taking the cost of those 2 tasks, creating a new one, or maybe you fold in one or the other. But it's basically, it boils down to, if you have your ID to the record that you want to target, then you're going to be manipulating that record directly, whether it be an add, update, or delete.
Okay, good.
I think
Corey, you got your hand up, and then that's going to be the last question just for time reasons. So go ahead, Corey.
Hey, thanks. Have you used this with WebDirect? How well does it work with that?
Yeah, we have not used it with WebDirect, and we had a project where we were using kind of like a UI for people to enter data, and internally we decided anything that has kind of, instead of read, anything that has any kind of read and write capabilities is going to be using a FileMaker UI. We have explored doing other things for WebDirect. We've done also FileMaker Go. WebDirect, we're using it primarily for read only. So like if you have a privilege set where users are going to go look at the data, we're doing that, but we're not doing any of this. But there are ways to do this approach for WebDirect as well. We just haven't explored it because we don't do a lot of WebDirect.
And that's actually the perfect transition. So first of all, thank you, Vince.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
That was really interesting, and obviously a very deep dive into the sort of inner workings of FileMaker. I think everybody learned a lot from that. So thank you again for presenting. So speaking of WebDirect, we had a request from Robert Holsey at Claris to come and just, I guess, make a little bit of an announcement or a request for help with some thoughts about WebDirect. So Robert, are you here? Yes,
I am.
Go ahead.
Yep.
Cool. Wow.
Thanks, Jonathan. And Vince, that was awesome. And thanks for all letting me sit in on this. It's great to see some familiar faces. For those that don't know me, Robert Holsey, I'm product manager, or product owner here at Claris. And these days I'm really focused on something that you may have heard us talking about at Engage, which is our efforts to modernize our web technologies. And you may have seen or sort of experimented with our first sort of dipping into that with our web authoring or quick app authoring experience in FileMaker. And the reason I'm here today is I'm looking to gather some research as well as some files for those of you that have been doing deployments to WebDirect. I'm working very closely with the engineering team as we're thinking about how we modernize this technology without also leaving us behind for all of us that have done WebDirect deployments. So my plea to you today is if you can either spare 30 to 60 minutes, sit down conversation with me over the next handful of weeks, or I should say, or if you have the ability to share with us any files that you've created designed specifically for WebDirect. It's great if the file has FileMaker Pro deployment elements of it as well. But our first real focus are for files that were designed with WebDirect deployment in mind. So what I'll do is I will post my email address for those that don't have it in the chat here in a moment, and open it up for a couple of quick questions if I can clarify anything. But the main point is just to put a plea out there for folks that have some time and are willing to sit down with me and just have a conversation. So any clarifying questions I can answer before I turn things back over?
Yeah, Robert, Dina Torok over here. Do you want copies of files or just kind of screen shares where you can take a look at them?
Whatever you're willing and able to provide, wherever possible, having the actual files is fantastic. We won't be sharing this outside of the organization. They would just be used by our development QA team. So as they're building new technologies or new approaches, we can go and test. One thing I should also mention, and we are not at this point yet, but if you're interested as we do beta builds and where situations where maybe for privacy reasons you can't share your files, in the future we'd also be able to get you builds where you could do testing on your side as well. But to answer your question, anything that you can provide us, if screenshots is as far as you can go, great. But if you've got physical copies of the files, you can send us even better.
So you're more or less interested how to work people, how people work with the WebDirect, how do they think, or do you want to or do you have some ideas you want to share with those people and see how this is received?
Sure. So far, or where I'm at right now, is the conversations are going to be mostly around, from the perspective of you as a developer, what has that process been like? What are the sort of tips and tricks you've learned over the years? What's really important for you deploying for WebDirect? And obviously, where are the gaps? Where are the things that WebDirect falls short on? The other thing I'm really trying to dig into as well is the end user experience. How do they consume the apps that you create? How do they get to them? What are the pain points, friction points that they have? What kinds of training do you have to overlay on sort of the FileMaker isms before they can even get into your WebDirect deployments? So it's for now that focus. But further down the line, I'm hoping that these conversations I start with all of you is the start of a conversation. So we'll do a 30, 60 minutes as time permits. But then as we go on, I may have follow-up questions, or I may have, hey, look, here's a wireframe, or here's just a concept, or maybe even a build that we might want to have share with you and get some feedback on. So again, it's very much let's just establish that connection and have the conversation grow from there.
So kind of personal ETS.
Yeah, that's one way to think about it, for sure.
Great.
Robert. Oh,
Was there a question? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So Robert, so it's maybe, yeah, personal ETS is the way to describe it, but it sounds like you're kind of just trying to gather some information about, as developers, where we push the WebDirect product, what it takes for us to do what we need to do, and what end users have to deal with in order to interact with it. So you have a better idea how it's being used versus guessing.
Correct. Yep. And one thing I should add there, one other piece that we're interested in, it's not sort of the primary first goal, but looking at what are the things that prevent moving to WebDirect. You know, we understand that WebDirect is phenomenal from a deployment standpoint. You don't have to deal with managing the installed software. But there's absolutely cases, I mean, Vince was just talking about one where the native clients still have their place. And that's not to say that we have the goal of trying to get rid of the native clients, but we're trying to remove as much barrier or much friction as possible for you all doing deployments and managing those deployments. So this is not sort of a way to get out of having a FileMaker Pro. It's just being able to deliver that best experience where your end users are. And ideally, where possible, being able to do that in the web so you don't have to do a deployment or manage a deployment.
Great. All right, well, thank you. Obviously, it's nice that you're reaching out to the community and looking for feedback. It sounds like fairly early in the process. And I think, you know, there are definitely going to be people who are going to want to contribute and help out. So
awesome.
thanks.
I appreciate again the time today. And I just posted my email address. Oh, I did it directly. Let me do it to everyone so that you all have that. And thanks again.
Sure. Are there any other announcements? Anything else anyone else wants to share with the group? If not, we're going to go into our breakout rooms. So this is something we've started doing over the recent meetings, just having about 5 minutes where we're going to probably have, what do we have, about 60 people. So probably about 14, 15 rooms of 3 or 4 people each. And it's just a chance to socialize a little bit, to talk to some people, maybe some familiar faces or people you don't know. And then when we come back, we'll resume with the meeting. So Dave, if you don't mind, can you pause the recording while we do sort of revive that? And to give credit, this is something I came across from a tweet by Tony White, who's here. So hi, Tony. And it was actually a link to a podcast that I wasn't familiar with, where he had picked it up. So there's a little bit of a chain of provenance here. I'll put links to both Tony's tweet and the podcast in the chat. But this definitely falls under the category of, it's not the things you don't know, it's the things you know that just ain't so, which is an old quote that's attributed to Mark Twain. I'm not sure if it really is him. So the thing that, you know, I don't know when global fields came into FileMaker, if someone historian knows off the top of their head, but they've been around for a long, long time. There's always been the conventional wisdom that if you opened a file locally, you put something in a global field, you closed it, and then you hosted it on the server, that value would be burned into that global field, right? That every time you open the file, you would see that value. And the only way to get rid of that would be to close the file, open it in FileMaker Pro, change the value in that field, close the file, reopen it in server. And that's just sort of the thing. And you know, it's become less of an issue now that I think pretty much everyone does their development on hosted files. But certainly back in the old days, you used to do a lot of local development. And then you'd either have to have a script or you'd have to remember, oh, I got to clear all those values out of those global fields before I host the file on the server. And if one wasn't, and certainly a lot of developers at the beginning, they'd be working on something locally and everything would work fine. And then they'd host it and they'd realize, oh, there's this value in this global field, et cetera. So I was very curious when, you know, on this, I saw this tweet and then the podcast that there was a solution for this. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to open a hosted file. And you can see here, it's a very simple file. It's just got a few global fields. and they have values that are, you know, quote unquote, burned in by the fact that something was put in those files. I put values in those files before I hosted them. So here's the tip. If I wanted to, for example, change the burned in value here that says Claris to FMDiSC, what I would do is go to that global text field and change it to a calculation field. And change it to now put in a value here. So we're going to put in, you know, FMDiSC. Obviously, I could put in nothing if I wanted no value in there. And the storage is still global on this calculation field. And so I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to close it. It still says Claris in here. But when I close the file, now it has FMDiSC in there. And now I can change that calculation field back to just a text field, still with global storage. And every time I open that file in the future, it now has my, oops. It now has my new value in the global field. So that just, like I said, blew my mind. This is one of those things that's been sort of conventional wisdom forever and ever. And I did test it a little earlier. The same thing works if you have a container. If you base64 encode the graphic that you want and put it in a container, you could effectively do the same thing. So if you have a company logo or something like that that's stored in a global field that you're using, you know, throughout the system, and they change their logo, this is a way of being able to change that without having to take the file down, change the graphic, rehost the file, et cetera, et cetera. So anyhow, that was just something, a little tip that I came across thanks to Tony's tweet and this podcast, and I just thought I'd share it with the group. So now you all know too.
Let me jump in and say attribution goes to a team out of Pittsburgh. It's in the tweet. That's had cool demo. I'd never tested it with containers. So the base 64 tip is like riffing. That's news to me and very cool. I was going to test it. Thanks for testing.
Yeah, it's funny. It occurred to me this morning. I was like, oh, I wonder if we could do that with a container. And I tried it, and it works fine. So
yeah, and it's bread and butter because you could optimize. You know, we all have these systems where you load the globals from a resource table, but if you wrap that with an if, you probably get a little pickup on speed. So it's bread and butter.
Yep.
Came out of Pittsburgh.
Okay. All right. I'm going to stop sharing. And then thanks again. So next up, we have Rob Russell coming all the way from Auckland, New Zealand. And big thanks to Rob for joining us. It's also 6:30 in the morning for him. So thank you, Rob, for getting up very early to share with us. And Rob, take it away.
Thank you very much. You do know there is a cost for not having coffee first thing in the morning. Unfortunately, I cannot make my coffee because it's too noisy. All right, I think you are looking at my screen. Can you just confirm that?
We got you.
Great. Okay. All right. Yes, so it's 6:35 in the morning here. I am right here. This is New Zealand and good old Aussie over there. And if I zoom in a little bit, you can see I am out of the CBD of Auckland, and right next to us, we have a giant forest, which is a great place to ride our horses, mountain bikes, run dogs, and generally do things that are not FileMaker, which are fabulous. Okay. I did not think up the name. Jonathan did that. I'm Rob. I am a quick let's see, let's do this. Rightio. Obligatory bio. I've been doing FileMaker a while, as a lot of people on this Zoom meeting have. I can see that. I used to work at Claris in Sydney back when we were called Claris International, so we had the name first. And that was a great time. From 92 until now, I have been an indie FileMaker developer. We live on a 10-acre property, as you could see in that little map there. We had a truck drive in with an office on the back, and that's where I'm sitting. And that was possibly one of the best things we've ever done. And I've done the occasional presentations at a couple of Phoenix DevCons and the Sydney DevCon a couple of years ago. Now, a good chunk of our business is a product that we called Athenaeum. Athenaeum is a library program predominantly for schools, but corporates as well. And we've probably got about 200, close to 200 installs. And a couple of those installs on rented servers that we've got. We have an SBA license, Solutions Bundle Agreement, and that means that I can host multi-tenant servers. So I've got 2 VMs, each with a dozen or so users on that. Now I'm actually going to connect to one of those because I have some dummy files on one of those servers. We have been doing this particular program since 1994. It's been a real stalwart for us. And I rewrote it from the ground up for efficiency, or cloud delivery, if you like. And exactly so that I could do what we did with these on these SBA servers. The rewrite took me about 3 to 4 years. So there's a lot of logic in here, as you know, older solutions go. And now we have an update mechanism, and it's fast. And what that means is that I can do regular updates to this particular program. So what I'm here to show you is how I do these updates. Dave and Jonathan thought that this would be a good thing to share. So here we go. By the way, with the SBA, it took me ages to figure it out, but I think it took ages for FileMaker to figure it out as well. Sorry, Claris. I'll put my money in the swear jar. It took ages for Claris to figure out the SBA. And now that we've figured it out, it actually works quite well. And it means that we have now a product that is vaguely competitively priced, and we can keep moving on with that. Now, to update these solutions, and I don't have too many slides here. I hate using slides, but you can just endure the first 5 minutes of this, everyone. I use the command line to update multiple files on each of one of these servers, and I have adapted this to single service solutions. And the reason I've done that is so that I can just quickly whip in, do an update, whip out. It is not completely automated. One of my colleagues, Kent, over at Kmart, we have a business relationship together. He does have a completely automated solution. I would say he's probably spent the best part of 9 months full-time work making that automated solution completely seamless. I was not prepared to go that level. I have got a semi-automatic solution. I like to watch what happens. I use the command line rather than the admin API because I got burned with the first version of the API being, admin API being deprecated. And I thought, well, bugger that, command line sits there. Oh, by the way, my vernacular is probably a little bit broader than it should be for Zoom. Anyway, I got burned with the admin API, but I will probably revisit that now that they've decided to stabilize that and not change and deprecate that. The logic is the same on Windows or Mac, and I'm about to show you how that works. It did take me 2 or 3 months to do this because, you know, I just like to tootle through this and not rush into this. Now, what I'm going to show you is running on Windows. We use the command processor. You could just as easily do this on the Mac terminal. On Windows, you need to download the curl command. On Mac, this is built in. We use 7-zip, which is open source, but importantly, it is scriptable, where if it is scriptable using, if the standard zip function of Windows is scriptable, that's opaque to me. So 7-zip is very, very easy to use. On the Mac, you do have a zip command built in on the command line. So this sort of logic will transfer very, very easily. We use FMS admin commands and the data migration tool. So let me just very quickly run through the logic and I'll show you what we do. We have a FileMaker server and it has n number of solution apps. I have a data migration folder that has this folder structure: clone, backup, source, new, and log. On a web server, I have a zipped clone that I want to download to our server to update my clients with. We then loop through all of our solutions and close solution 1, and we copy it to a backup folder and to our data migration source folder. The data migration tool takes the clone, takes the source, smooshes them together and outputs a new file and writes what it's done to the log, which is the bit that I like to look at after this. Then after that, we just take that new file, copy it back onto the solution and open it. That's really it. It's not outrageously hard. The batch files that I've used are here, and in fact, I will copy that and post that into the chat right now. That is a temporary link. If you do want to grab it, then feel free. If you want to talk to me, my email address is also in the chat. Great. Well, let's demo that. Now I'm on a VPN to 2 servers. I'll disconnect that one. So let's go into our Windows machine. So I'm going to hope that if I'm A, going too fast, or B, you're not seeing something, someone will scream at me so that I can hear that. All right, now, so let's start up the command processor. And I'm just going to type a little batch file called demo that takes me to my demo folder and just lists the command files that we have got available. I can look at these files if you like, and we'll just start up VS Code, which you can do from the command line by saying code and full stop. The full stop or period means that we're going to open code and look at the folder that I'm currently in. And that's opening up. Great. And I'm also going to open up Explorer the same way so that you can see what I am looking at. Now, I know these are Windows folders and don't look fabulous there. Now I'm getting quite a lot of static through here. Is that me or is that someone else? That's someone else. Okay. Great. So let's actually do something. Now, the first step in what we do is to download the clone. And if we have a look at what that script, well, let's do it first. So if I just go download, press the tab key and use autocomplete, I can download that from my server, and I have now already dropped into the clone folder the clone of the solution file that we need to update. Now, I said the file was called Athenaeum. If we were to have a look at the server, which I will do, just to show there's nothing up my sleeve, these are all of the files on that particular server. And I'm going to update this file called Athenaeum_label and this file trial_Athenaeum. So, and I'll leave all the others alone because they're production files. And I'm tempting the demo gods here. Great. Now, the next, so what that script did, very simple, download clone. Is it grabs a file, grabs the name, creates our zip directories and our clone file path. This is where I have the curl program installed. This is where I have the zip program installed. I have to do this on Windows. We don't have to do that on Mac because the terminal by default has that installed. I download anything that I've previously downloaded, and then we use our curl command to download that file to a file called download zip. Now, the way Windows works, or the command processor works, is you wrap your variables around with percent signs, and that will be expanded at runtime. And if I just turn that echo off on, save that, and ran this again, you can trace through what you're seeing. So if you do try something like this, just turn that echo back on. All right, so I've downloaded the file. Now I'm going to do the update and then I'm going to explain what's happened. So I'm just going to say update all, press enter. Now you'll notice sometimes we see some red text in the screen. And let's click over here. Let's close that. And let's go to our update all. And really all this file is doing, right, it's already done one of the updates. It's now doing the second update. And you'll see it's waiting here. For, it waits 12 seconds. Now, in my instance, 12 seconds was sufficient time to be guaranteed that the file is actually closed before I start manipulating that particular file. When you go to the command line, there are some crude things here that you need to do. You don't have the sophistication of what you have in the admin API. While you can make that a little bit faster, I don't wish to spend that particular time doing so. Now, I have already updated those files. So both of those are updated. Admittedly, the files are only small. They're 50 odd megabytes each. My data files for the clients are typically 150 to say 450 megabytes. This can do a server of a dozen files in around about 18 to 25 minutes. So it's fairly quick. And what that means is that we can do frequent updates and stay very responsive to our users and add in suitable modifications as we need. Now, what this update command does is basically loop through a file called masterfile.txt. Once it's got that particular file, it calls an update script. The master file is simply a file with comments and a file name and a folder name. And that is all. And let's go back to update. It says, if not call. So if this is not a comment, go and call our update file, passing those two parameters that we've pulled from that file into the update command. Now, this is where things start to get a little bit interesting. I have got a large text here so you guys can see this, which makes it a little bit hard to see, but the general gist is, Set our source location, backup location, clone location. Set our data migration account and passwords. For the purposes here, I've just set these to migrate and migrate. FileMaker's recommendation is to maybe set the password as the UUID and the account as the UUID for the file. We need to control the FileMaker server admin, and we need a password for that. Now, while I don't like embedding text passwords in text files like this, you do have to put it somewhere. And I've put this in a file called c/setlog.cmd, which the average user can't see should they get access to this particular command. But I have a copy of that setlog file. By the way, it's raining very heavily. Where we are, it is semi-rural. If I drop off the internet, then you'll see a frozen screen, and I guess I'm gone for the day. We have been known to have electricity drop off from time to time. So if we have a look at the setlog command, all it does is sets two variables, a variable called FMS account to the FileMaker server admin account that you use to log into the FileMaker server admin console, and the FileMaker server password. Let's go back to our update command. Now, if you recall from the old days, we used to have go-to commands. Well, if you're in the command processor, welcome back to the old days. You have go-tos. So go-tos are really hard to debug, but they can be a lot of fun.
No, you go downstairs and stamp it.
Okay. Once we've done all of those,
when you go pick up the mail, if you stamp it downstairs.
We might need someone to mute that because I actually can't hear myself.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. Right. Right. If we don't pass the parameters, we go to end. So there's some very basic stuff going on here. This is the command that does the work. Sorry, this command, it doesn't do the work. It lists the files and writes them to a log file. Now, what we're doing in the 12 seconds is we're looping a couple of times, and we're doing a grep search, which is find string on Windows. We are looking for the name of our file in the list of open files. If we can't close that file in a suitable amount of time, we then bug off and don't bother processing this file. Once we've got it closed, we can then turn around and create our backups, copy the live file to our source folder, copy the live file to our backup folder, and if we go back into here and look at our backup folder, you can see I have two backups of the files that are date stamped. We could zip those if we wanted to as well. In the 3 years I've been running this particular solution, I've only had to go to the backups once. So I'm fairly comfortable that we're onto something here. Now we use the data migration tool. Now, I don't know if you've used this before, but even if you're not managing hosted servers, FM data migration is a wonderful.
I don't know how many. What did
copying data from old files to new files is quite fascinating.
My car's on the third floor. 8 boxes of water in there. Can you?
Jefferson Crane, can you mute, please?
Righty-ho. So the way the FM data migration tool works is it asks for where's the source that you're going to update, where's the clone, and you can see we're just replacing variables here. What account do I need to use for the source file? What password? We do the same thing for the clone and the clone file because they can have different passwords. Where are we writing to? I've told my copy to ignore value lists. People in FileMaker files can create their own value lists. If you don't turn that if you don't set this, you'll keep their value lists. I don't want them to keep value lists in our particular solution, so we turn that off. So that's the bit that works. This is wickedly fast. You really should look into that. And then we would, then what I do to screen is I output the log file, but I do a search for the words error, not, and invalid. When I do that, I get the not, tables not migrated, 0. Great, that's exactly what I want to see. Fields not migrated, 0. Perfect. Fields with evaluation errors equals 0. There are certain circumstances where you have unstored calcs. Yes, you might see some funniness going on there, but that's beyond the scope of this session. Now you'll notice that I've got this in red. In the command line, we have this wonderful thing of dealing with escape characters to add color into the terminal, but it works. So really what I'm doing is I'm probably doing a Sudoku in the background after I've run this, and I'm just looking at the red text on screen. The final bit is I output the log, and I'm looking the very final bit after we've looped through all of the files, and I look for the FileMaker Server Admin console messages, such as closing the files, it's successfully closed. If this step is not here, I know this particular file did not close. I do get a date stamp of when it started to do each update. So this was the first file, which was at 6:27:07 a.m. I then did the second file, which was 6:27:31. So you can see it took 24 seconds to do that particular update of that small 50 meg file. Then FileMaker Server Admin will, the console will output the opening commands and open. So if I see closing, closed, opening, opened, I know that file has been satisfactorily updated. And of course, I have multiple backups. I've got backups created via FileMaker Server, backups created by this particular script. And being a paranoid Android, I just like to have lots and lots of backups. Now that basically is the process in a nutshell. And there really isn't much else to show, but let me encourage you to think about how you might put that into your own solutions. I do have this on client solutions where there's only one file, and all I do is I change the paths at the top. In fact, all I do is change the, let's see, the live database path. I change the passwords as appropriate. And I think that's about it. Oh, that's right. And I changed the master file.txt. I might create a file called onefile.list and basically process that. And that works just fine for me. Now, before I go into the second part, do we have questions? So now is the time to ask those. Oh, crickets chirping. Now, I know Jonathan's run off to Las Vegas, so he's gone.
Rob, this is Kevin Frank. Hello.
Kevin, how are you?
Just peachy, mate. You had, just a second ago, you were showing where you were calling your set command and said you had pulled the, do you remember that? Where you have call? Yes.
So I call it, I call it set log, and you know this is nothing more than a level of security. It's not security at all; it's obscurity, and there are ways to retrieve passwords, and I would defer to people like Wim for really secure ways to do this. This is not something I would put on a public server.
Okay, so I'm just asking if on lines 3 and 4, after the equals sign, that's a literal text string of the password and the account and the password?
Exactly. So,
Okay.
you know, if my password was dog breath, no quotes, just put the words there like that.
Got it. Thank you.
If you're using the Mac, you would need to, well, you'd probably do it a different way anyway, but you could do it this way. You would put quotes around that. So most of your terminal shells do work that way.
Rob, this is Dave Knight. Fantastic presentation, a ton of depth and thought went into this, obviously. My question, how long did it take for you, to get pretty much all the subtleties of this kind of smoothed over to a point where you felt really good about it?
Yeah, well, that assumes that I feel good about it. No, that's the way I developed this was I cut a lot of my Windows chops back in the 80s and my DOS chops back in the 80s, and I had forgotten a lot of that stuff. So I really broke it down into small scripts, small command files, and basically got each bit working and then progressively build this up together to make one. Well, at the moment it's 2 files. I could in fact put the download file, just call that download script, into the main file, and then I've got one location. So that would have taken me probably about 6 to 8 weeks of part-time work. But it was a problem that I really wanted to solve, because suddenly I had a couple of dozen clients snapping at my heels, wanting a lot of stuff. And it's like, all right, this is a production environment. How do we do this? How do we develop this without stepping on their toes? And I will say, one of the reasons for going for this particular server over here, sorry, that one, wrong one here, for this particular server here, let's close that. Come on. One of the reasons doing this is that I run the FileMaker server myself versus dealing with my client's IT. Now, we've got 200 odd clients. We've got lots and lots of IT people we deal with. Some of them just let us go on the servers and everything's good. But of course, you know what it's like. The tech guy comes along and says, well, we're just going to snapshot this VM. And they do their own stuff. I have total control of this server. There has been 4 minutes of downtime in 3 years, and we only make the server available during business hours from roughly 6:30 a.m. in the morning to, we tell the people notionally 4:30, 5:30 p.m. in the afternoon during work days, Monday to Friday. So that gives me quite a lot of leeway after hours where I can run schedules, do updates overnight if I need to, or I tend to do these on a Saturday afternoon. But I have total control of this server, and therefore it just runs. I've been very lucky. The provider of the VM has not had any outages, nor have his ISPs. So yeah, we've been very lucky there.
So with all your customers, you might, I mean, you've got a new version, you're rolling it out, you've got a wide number of customers, different IT, different sized files and so forth. Might take you, gently moving forward at the later hours or weekends or something, might take you a week or two to get everybody kind of concurrent?
No, it takes half an hour.
For everybody?
Yes.
Oh, so you are running this concurrently across multiple servers?
Yeah, so I've got 2 servers where I'll trigger this. These are my SBA servers. If I'm not doing a Sudoku or taking my dog for a walk or looking at the fluffy cat that's standing at the door wanting to come into my office, if I'm not doing that, I might actually choose to go onto other servers. Now, I mentioned that Kent at Kmart has an automated way of doing that. Now, I said we have a business relationship, so he licenses our library software. I'm just going to open this. and I've just opened this file on the server, and if I look down the bottom left, 1273. So there's my build number. I know that those updates that we just did actually worked. Kent does this in an automated fashion, and what he does is he runs a FileMaker script PSOS on each one of his servers. He has around about 460 servers that he deals with. No, sorry, about 440 servers that he deals with. And each one of those servers looks at his downloads directory, pulls the version. It looks at its currently installed version. If the version to be pulled is higher, it then goes through the process I've just done. So he has spent a long time making that all work, PSOS, and it's brilliant and it works. Because we have a business relationship, I can upload cloned files to his downloads directory, update a version in a JSON file somewhere, and then all of those clients will be updated automatically that evening. And it usually happens at around about 1:15 midnight. So it's really quite astonishing what he's done. And the next thing I'm going to show you is something else that Kent's done, but any more questions on this particular procedure? No. Great. Excellent. All right, well, let's keep going. Just quickly. So if I were motivated to do this, yeah, I would combine the scripts, put fewer visuals into this. So there are a few things going on there. I'm definitely at some stage going to switch to the admin API rather than FileMaker Server Admin. That will give me better error checking, by the way. So the error codes returned by FMS admin are reasonably crude. They work, but they're crude. Whereas the admin API gives you a lot more information. I certainly would do more error checking, and then I would do what Ken's doing and would trigger this each evening just by checking that server and looking for some sort of full automation. Great. Now, speaking of Kent, one of the things that, and I've disconnected from that machine, which is a dopey thing to do, because what I was going to do was show you this particular product called the FileMaker Server Backup Manager. And what this is was written by Kent to help manage his, well, he's now reduced the number of servers because he's also hosting, like we are, 450 odd FileMaker servers. This is what FileMaker should do, and he's offered the code to FileMaker. What they did is they went down the startup restoration path, and I know this is being recorded, but that didn't work. And in fact, one of the things that we have to do if you're running FileMaker 18, FileMaker Server 18, to use Backup Manager is you need to ensure that the startup restoration is turned off. This solution manages the startup process of your FileMaker server, and it allows you extremely easy restore of your backups. And it does have some limitations. Now, one of the things that Kent has done is he has made this free for everyone in the FileMaker community to use. And I've got that link there, which goes to FileMaker Backup Manager. You can download that here. Let me encourage you, if you're managing a server, to please do this, because it's reduced our maintenance of servers that I don't control, I would estimate, by around about 80%. So let's have a quick look at this and what it does.
Rod, are you going to repost that link?
Admin console. I've stored my credentials for this particular demo, and let's just go to full screen. I'm running Firefox, and let's reduce the size just a little bit. There we go. As I said to you before, I have 34 databases hosted on this particular server. We have quite a number of backup schedules running here. This is very much tied in with our SBA. Each site gets its own daily backup, which we zip and then we drop into their download folder, and we give them their own copy of their backups that they can download each day if they choose. With the configuration, there is one main thing we need to do, and that is we need to turn off automatically opening databases that are in the database folder. So we want everything to start, but we don't want the databases to open. Now, let's step over to FileMaker Backup Manager. Now, what this is a service on Mac, service on Windows and a daemon on Mac that's written in Zojo to get this particular interface. And it watches FileMaker Server, and it watches for FileMaker Server starting up. Let's go to settings. Now, what you do is you tell FileMaker Backup Manager, what are my passwords, and you verify that, and it stores those. What I want to happen is when I restart this server, I want FileMaker Backup Manager to restore any files that were not properly closed. So if a power outage goes, someone just shut down the server, those files will not be properly closed, and FileMaker still use, I think it's bit 14 of the file. It's called a dirty bit, and if that is set, that means that the file has not been opened properly. When you open a FileMaker file, amongst all the other things that goes on is that particular bit gets cleared. So he's looking at that to work out whether or not the file was restored properly. Excuse me. When he restores the files, you can keep timestamp copies of your files that have been removed, and I would highly recommend that. And you can store this on some volume somewhere if you like, or it'll just go into the standard FileMaker server backup directory. Let's have a look at our backups tab. Now, this is a list of all of the backups that have happened recently on this particular FileMaker server. This was the original reason he wrote this particular program. The IT people would turn the servers off, not shut them down properly. So he would go back in and restore a particular file on, restore a particular backup. Let's say it's the 1047 backup that he wanted to restore. When you click on that, I can just click this button here. That will close the files on the server, move the live files off to the backup, and then go and restore everything from this particular directory. Inside this backup, there are two files. I could also just say restore just this particular file. This particular feature is one of those features that you never want to use, but if you do use it, it's just fabulous. You've got access to, it logs everything that it does, and you've got direct access here like you don't have in the FileMaker Server Admin Console now. If there's anyone at FileMaker Claris listening here, just take note of that. You also have this nice little commands tab, and these are buttons that basically run the FMS admin command and with these particular options. So for example, I could list all of the files live on the server, and that is just outstanding. The demo gods, I did not wave the rubber chicken. Yeah.
Sorry.
I will add, this has actually been sitting here since last night before I went to bed. So I'm guessing it's probably timed out, and I'm not going to log back in because then all of you guys will get to see my, actually you may not, Let's log out. Oh good, it's saved it. Let's log back in. That looked too fast to me. So let's close that. Let's close this, go here. Oh yes, good, excellent. I did save that. Let's try that again. Okay, so the FileMaker server, the admin engine has died. So I'm going to see if I can restart that just by clicking on the button that says restart admin server. No, it's not going to work. I'm not going to restart this server, but just you're going to have to take it as read that we can run a whole bunch of commands without having to remember what the FMS admin syntax is. He does have this button here that says set server prefs, startup restoration enable false. That is the one thing that you really should execute, and so on. All right, well, sorry about the demo gods there, but at least you get the idea. Let me encourage you to look at that and try it on your dev server. It really is quite good. And if you have some dummy files that you can put on that server, load them up, load up FileMaker Server Backup Manager, and then go and turn the computer off at the wall, the server off, and then turn it back on and see what happens, and let it do its stuff. It really is quite useful. And that's free. Kent thought it was very important that that be made available to everyone. Now, if I look at the time, I see that over there it's 12:15. I suspect you finish it around about 12. So we've gone a little bit over time. It's 7:15 here. So any questions?
No questions, but very impressive. I'm going to use some of this stuff right away.
Look, it's just wonderful. Seriously, it has reduced our. There are three things that have really impacted my career. One is IT people turning off servers and shutting down files and snapshotting files incorrectly. That just drives me bonkers bananas. That doesn't annoy me as much as Java does, but I'm not going to talk about that. That's going to set my facial tick off. And the other one is just having to come into the office every day and do work.
You can't fix all of those things, Rob. You can't fix all of them.
Well, actually, I can fix them. Yes, I can.
Well, you can, yeah.
One day.
The thing is, in a large environment, sometimes it's not that they're doing stuff wrong. It's that it takes forever to get them to do the things you need them to do. And it's just because of the size of the, enterprise.
Yes, it is. It also is often a lot to do with the importance of this particular solution in their particular environment. And, we're dealing with, a lot of our clients are school libraries, and, they are really third-class citizens, and trying to get them to do stuff properly is quite hard. So the line we take with these people is, look, I'm not going to help you with the library. I'm going to help you not think about this particular server so you can do your other stuff. And that actually works, and it works very well.
Yeah, I think some of the automation that, number one, the automation and the simplification of things, but boy, just from a peace of mind standpoint, to have a single place to go to and see so much and be able to control so much without having to, kind of porpoise in and out of multiple applications and so forth. It gives you sort of a dashboard that gives you vision into a lot of the things that you're managing.
Oh, exactly. And sorry, I did mention there are limitations. So one of the limitations, there are two limitations at the moment. It still uses FMS admin command lines behind the scenes. He does have a version that runs the data API, the admin API.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to pursue that soon. And one of the reasons I found is It will also not work if your FileMaker server service is not installed on the C drive on a Windows machine. So we like to run partition machines, C drive, operating system, D drive, live data, E drive containers, and maybe another drive for the local applications. I ran into this just the other day. It does not work if you put your FileMaker server on a different drive.
Oh,
the API. Yes, Tony.
I have a question. First off, very impressive. Let me run a scenario by you to help me understand what's happening here. So you got a bunch of people that go enter data, and it's all, you know, awesome data. And then somebody pulls the plug on the server, and the files get a dirty bit, because they got crashed essentially. So then when you restart the server through some methodology, the application either reads the dirty bit by peeking into the file or runs some admin and notice that the verify command is running. Hold on, I'll call you back. Sorry about that. I unmuted to talk, and then I got a phone call at the same time. All right, dirty bit, and then it runs. So then is it automatically restarting and potentially ignoring the data that's been entered? Or is there some like, hey, you know, we rolled to a backup, we might have lost some data, heads up? I hope that's a clear question.
It's definitely the second scenario.
Hold on, I'm going to mute.
Okay, so this relies on progressive backups. You must use progressive backups, which means that your backups are, the backup that's being restored is likely no more than 5 minutes old. And yes, we tell the users, sorry, you've lost up to 5 minutes data. And they go, oh, that spreadsheet that form I was working on, you know, that's gone. Well, yeah, you've lost one screen of stuff. That does happen.
Okay, and that's cool and clear. Anyway, awesome presentation. I'm going to watch the video. I'm going to watch this thing twice.
Okay, that's great.
I think, you know, we've actually found, we kind of really had a second awakening to progressive backups a year or so ago. You know, they've been around for a while and the promise of them was always good on paper. They're actually not very taxing on the server. You know, when you're doing a full backup, it's really doing a lot of work. You know, it's locking records and all that sort of stuff. The progressives seem to have a pretty light amount of weight on the server. Once you get those initial copies done, it doesn't seem, and a lot of the times we'll put the progressives on a separate set of drives. So the data drive is obviously writing to a separate set. And at times even put them on, you know, on, oh God, what's the new NAND memory drives, which are incredibly fast. Sometimes we'll do them on there, but they're actually, pardon me?
NVE?
Yeah.
NVMe.
Yeah, we'll put them on an NVMe, and those can just run really, really fast. But they're not very crushing to the hardware comparatively to what we've seen when you're running a full backup.
That's correct. I've not noticed any difference once you've got that initial backup, and it usually doesn't take too long to do the backups. But also use your external container data storage properly, and you just make life really easy for yourself. So, you know, we might be throwing around, my biggest solution has got 490 megs of raw FileMaker data. They might have 0.5 terabyte of external container data. That's not touched, and it doesn't need to be touched in either the data migration or in the FileMaker Backup Manager using progressive backup. So yeah, fabulous. I love it. All right, anything else? Any other questions? Because if there's not, I'm going to get my first coffee of the day.
This has been absolutely fantastic, Rob. We really appreciate you getting up at the wee hours to meet us across the pond. And let's get you back when we don't have to wait an extra 10 or 20 years to get you back. For those that don't know, Rob's just brilliant. He's done a really great job on a lot of things. He's done other presentations before, but we're thrilled to have him. And thanks for bringing your A game here. Also, thanks to Jonathan for his tip. And Vince, what a phenomenal job on that transactional model. That's a real brain twist, but it's also a game changer, I think, in terms of the performance. So if we have any other questions, any other announcements, we're finishing up a little early. We normally go to 1, but if anybody else has any other announcements, love to get those shared. Otherwise, we can pull the plug on this thing and call it a day.
Wanted to say hello and goodbye, Rob. I wasn't able to greet you before.
Hi, Lynn. How you going? Long time no see.
I know.
And the same, Rob. It's a pleasure to see you.
Now, who did that come from?
That was Mr. Blackwell.
Yes, sir.
Oh my goodness! There's a blast from the bar. Oh, there he is. He's standing in front of the FileMaker sign. Hey, that sign's gone.
That's gone.
That thing is gone.
Change the logo.
Oh dear. Yeah, I love that logo. Excellent.
All right, guys. I hope
awesome.
I hope, like they've already mentioned, I hope you guys go back to the video. There's a lot of nuggets in here, and I think we're going to enjoy playing this back in a little slow-mo. But if there's no other announcements or any other questions, we're going to say goodbye, and everybody have a good weekend.
Bye-bye. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rod.
Thanks again.
Ciao, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, Vincent.
Again, Vince.
Yeah, you're welcome. Bye.